Hello and welcome to Friday's Granada Reports.
Yeah, good evening. Here's what's coming up on tonight's programme.
When 52 years is not enough, Southport's MP calls for the killer of BB, Elsie and Alice to get a whole life sentence for their sake and for the girls who survived.
I want to remove that uncertainty and make sure that the sentence now reflects the severity and the magnitude of the crime, and to give surety to those victims and the families that he never ever leaves prison.
The false information that fuelled fires and fury. We look at how the far-right used the Southport murders to spark last summer's riots.
Also on the programme tonight. Are the serene sands of the Fylde coast about to be torn up to make way for an offshore energy plan? We talk to those who say their beach and businesses are under threat.
Top of the Premier League and the Champions League, but Liverpool manager Arne Slot's dad says he could still do better.
They were the stars of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Now you can see the famous French horns, which added a touch of brass to a Beatles classic.
And in the weather, Storm Iowyn definitely made its presence felt today, but the good news is it's now pulling away and things should turn calmer over the weekend. All the details coming up.
Well, first tonight, and the MP for Southport says the 52-year sentence handed down to the child killer Axel Ruder-Cabana isn't enough.
Yeah, Patrick Hurley, who became the town's MP just weeks before the attack, says Ruder-Cabana should have received a whole life term like that handed to nurse Lucy Letby.
Well, there are more questions tonight about how the killer was allowed to slip through the net when he was on the radar of the police, social services and the government's anti-terrorism programme, Prevent.
But there's also been more touching tributes to his three young victims, BB, Elsie and Alice.
With the latest, our reporter, Anna Yosef.
Axel Ruder-Cabana's murderous rampage lasted 15 minutes. His victims' families will have to endure the pain and suffering he's caused for the rest of their lives. Yesterday, he was jailed for a minimum of 52 years, which means, while unlikely, he could be released when he's 70. The MP for Southport, where Ruder-Cabana carried out his campaign of carnage, believes the teenager should spend the rest of his life behind bars.
The crime he committed here in Southport was of exceptional brutality, exceptional circumstances here. I want to remove that uncertainty and make sure that the sentence now reflects the severity and the magnitude of the crime, and to give surety to those victims and the families that he never ever leaves prison.
The Labour MPs asked the Attorney-General to review if the sentence was unduly lenient, claiming it doesn't reflect the crimes committed.
So Ruder-Cabana, when he committed the crime, was just 9 days short of his 18th birthday. And this was a premeditated crime, this premeditated multiple murder. One of the things I think was premeditated is that he perhaps committed the crime prior to his 18th birthday so that the law could not implement a full life tariff, and that he might actually get out of prison in due course. To all intents and purposes, he was an adult man on that day, killing those little girls, and he should be treated as an adult man.
Others are now also calling for the law to be changed to allow whole-life sentences to be handed to minors. But today, the Defence Secretary suggested this was unlikely to happen.
On the question of the age limit for whole-life sentences, the last government did lower it to 18 in light of the Manchester Arena bomber. It lowered it to the point that it's consistent with international law, and that still stands.
In court, it emerged Ruder-Cabana was in contact with social services and had also been referred to the government's anti-extremism programme Prevent 3 times. But today, Alderhay Children's Hospital Trust confirmed for the first time he'd been under the care of their mental health services between 2019 and 2023, but stopped engaging in February 2023 despite continued offers of support. The Trust say they're participating fully in a children's safeguarding practice review to identify if any learning can be made. While the killer may now be caged and a public inquiry announced by the Prime Minister to investigate any missed opportunities to stop him, the loss of BB, Elsie Dot and Alice is felt as keenly as ever. Anna Yosef, ITV News.
Well, a number of statements have been released by the families of girls who were attacked or witnessed the attack in Southport last summer. They are very moving, and if you want to read them in full, they are on our website, itv.com/Granada.
Well, next, and how did false information about Axel Rudder-Cabana spark days of rioting in the wake of the Southport murders? And why is that false information still being spread?
Yeah, within hours of the attack, a rumour was circulating online that the then 17-year-old was an asylum seeker who'd arrived the year before by boat.
Well, it fueled days of rioting led by far-right activists, which saw mosques targeted and police officers injured.
Police, prosecutors and the judges Liverpool Crown Court said the killer had no clear ideology and that his attacks could not be classed as terrorism.
Well, our reporter Emma Sweeney looks at how violence spread from a town where most people were calling for calm and peace.
They were scenes that evoked a deep sense of sadness right around the world. Scenes of a community who had no words, and so the only thing left to do was to stand together in silent solidarity. Just one day before, an unimaginable act of evil had been carried out in this seaside town. An act of evil that left 3 girls dead and many more injured. But as the people of Southport stood shoulder to shoulder, just a mile or so down the road, activists from the far right were about to unleash a night of chaos. The rioters who descended on Southport that night were fuelled by misinformation. There were claims that the suspect was an asylum seeker who'd arrived in the UK by boat just a year before. A false name was also published and spread by online algorithms. The protesters focused their rage on Muslims and gathered outside the local mosque.
The initial wave was actually individuals just presuming that it would be a Muslim, presuming it would be an asylum seeker, and that spread really, really quickly. But not long after that, we started to see more conscious spreading of misinformation. So even as news was beginning to break and the police and the authorities were releasing information, we saw individuals, especially within the far right, consciously going online to spread misinformation.
The following day, Rudder-Cabana was charged with 3 counts of murder and 10 of attempted murder. Because of his age, he wasn't named by police. More demonstrators gathered across the country saying enough is enough. When Rudder-Cabana first appeared in court, restrictions around naming him were lifted, and by now it was also clear that the suspect was born in the UK. Despite this, that evening demonstrators gathered outside a hotel housing asylum seekers in Manchester. And over the following days, the trend of protests continued up and down the country, including outside one mosque in Liverpool. But the imam there crossed over the divide and refused to let hatred win.
We want people to come together, to talk together, to eat together. So keep your eyes open for that. Everybody's more than welcome to come along to that.
And you know, there's an old ancient Arabic saying that 70 lies casts a spell. Once you hear the same lie 70 times, you assume it's the truth. And so these narratives are really strong. They're not national narratives, they're actually global narratives, and they're being constantly pushed.
The government said there would be swift justice for those involved in the unrest, and on the 7th of August, 58-year-old Derek Drummond from Liverpool was the first to be jailed for violent disorder. He was given 3 years. Since then, more than 100 others have been sentenced, and detectives say there's more to come.
Well, Emma joins us in the studio now. And Emma, as you said, those riots during the summer were fuelled by misinformation. But how did it get to that point?
Well, I think the first thing to point out is it's because the far right very quickly leapt on this. It very quickly became an us and them. It very quickly became about issues like race, religion, immigration, and some of those narratives are still being pushed online now. Now, look, we're not saying that everybody caught up in the riots are on the far right or everybody jailed is in the far right. Many people went out there because they had legitimate concerns over what had happened in Southport. Many people were heartbroken. But the fact of it is the riots were fuelled by misinformation, not just by groups in this country, but also groups as far afield as America or other parts of Europe. And then that misinformation spread because of online algorithms. Now, some also believe that the riots were not helped by what's been described by some as a vacuum of information. Some, like the Reform UK leader Nigel Farage, claimed that this happened because the government wasn't being honest with people. So, for example, in the days and weeks following what had happened in Southport, we know that there was discovery of ricin, there was a discovery of an Al-Qaeda document, but the public wasn't told about that until October, when more charges were brought against Axel Rudakabana.
And why is that, Emma? Is that because of rules around contempt of courts?
Well, that's exactly it. Yeah, we have really strict rules in this country, and that's because for fear of prejudice in any future jury, if you do that, you could bring down a future court case. Now, some say that perhaps those rules are too strict and they need looking at, they need modernising, but as they stand, that's, exactly what it is.
Yeah, and Emma, feeding into all of this, I guess, is public confusion around why this incident wasn't treated as a terror attack.
Yeah, and again, we're told that this comes down to the current rules as they stand, although the Prime Minister has said again that those rules perhaps need to be looked at. But as they stand right now, Rudakabana's actions did not meet the legal definition of terrorism. He had an Al-Qaeda document, but he also looked at other extremist material. He looked at Nazi material, he looked at shootings in school, he looked at other murders, and so the judge in this case said that he did not kill to further a political, an ideological or a religious cause, although again it's not stopped some people online claiming that he is an Islamist extremist.
Emma Sweeney, thanks so much.
OK, and other news today, and the clean-up's continuing after Storm Iowyn brought exceptionally high winds to much of the region. Schools were closed on the Isle of Man after the Met Office there issued a rare red warning and recorded gusts of up to 91 miles per hour. Elsewhere, walls and trees were brought down and rail and tram services here in the UK were delayed or cancelled. Electricity North West says they are working to restore power in some areas, but have a warning for customers.
Because of the increased volume of power cuts, but also because of the bad weather conditions, we're actually advising customers that some of our estimated times to restore supply at the moment is actually 6 o'clock tomorrow evening. And the reason for that is because the working conditions may not allow us to restore supplies.
A brave police officer has been commended for disarming a man who was knocking on doors in Oldham while carrying a large kitchen knife.
Hi, my name is... Stay away from there!
PC Anthony Spence tried to taser the suspect before there was a chase on foot. The drama came to an end when the officer used his baton to disarm the offender, who was later detained under the Mental Health Act. Well, PC Spence was given the commendation by the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police, Stephen Watson.
Residents of a flood-hit apartment block in Stockport have started to move back in after parts of the building were deluged at New Year. More than 400 people living in Meadow Mill were forced to leave and seek temporary accommodation. Some have now returned after work to strip and clean damaged areas on the ground floor and restore electricity supplies. But they've been told not to drink their tap water until the end of the month.
If it floods again, then I would rethink seriously about vacating the building. We've had 3 weeks of unprecedented stress and anxiety on people. I don't want that again. I want to live a normal daily life like most people do.
Hope they're all back in soon. Well, now here's Charlene with what's coming up on the ITV Evening News at 6:30.
Storm Iowyn batters the UK and Ireland with disruption to schools, travel and electricity. Wind speeds of over 100 miles an hour have been recorded, with trees uprooted and homes damaged. A mother sentenced to further manslaughter of her 4 children after they died in a house fire. And Donald Trump orders the release of the John F. Kennedy assassination files. But what will they show? Join us for those stories and more from 6:30.
Intriguing. Well, next tonight, time is running out for people living on the Fylde coast in Lancashire to make their views known on a controversial scheme linked to a wind farm in the Irish Sea.
But it's not the wind farm that's causing the row. It's what could be 2 years of disruption the scheme will cause.
That's because of a project that's planned for taking the power inland from the wind farm via huge underground cables.
Yeah, and protesters say that people living in the path of the scheme haven't been properly informed. The developer behind the plans say disruption will be kept to a minimum, as our reporter Lucille Brobby reports.
A peaceful coastline under threat. Frustration is growing among residents in Fylde as plans to connect an offshore wind farm to substations in Lancashire could endanger not only the local landscape but its countryside and wildlife too.
2, 4, 6, 8, save our beaches, not too late.
Protesters say a shorter alternative route can be taken that avoids destroying the greenbelt and beach.
So supposedly this project is to combat global warming, climate change. But the irony is that digging through our sand dunes will adversely affect our flood risk hugely. 2 massive tunnels being dug through the sand dunes will affect the integrity of our flood defence.
This is the only place where people come for exercise, fresh air. Their mental and physical health is kept at a good level by coming here. Add to that the fact that these roads will be gridlocked for up to 6 years. You are effectively asking these people to be prisoners in their own home.
The development involves running 2 undersea cables landing near Blackpool Airport, which then run underground, connecting 2 offshore wind farms to substations in Kirkham and Newton.
Protesters say the proposed plans have been poorly advertised, which has left many local residents unaware of the scale of disruption it will cause to its beaches, local businesses and the surrounding area.
Christine owns a horse riding school in Fylde. The proposed route will cut through the land along her riding school, which she says will put her out of business.
They've told me operational 6 to 8 years, very noisy, lots of vibration, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This will just finish us because obviously horses are flight animals. We're in a routine, our horses know where they live. To suddenly have this disruption, the traffic and everything else in general will make it impossible for us to continue.
In a statement, a Morgan & Morecambe spokesperson said,
"The offshore wind farms could generate enough electricity to power 2 million UK homes every year and make an important contribution to the UK's renewable energy targets. Project of this scale and importance can't be delivered without potential impacts, but we have sought to minimise these. We are committed to ensuring public access to the beach as far as possible."
The project will be examined by the government's planning inspectorate for 6 months before a decision is made. Residents have until the 27th of January to register to have their say on the plans. Lucille Brobby, ITV News, Fylde.
Beautiful shots there of the Fylde coast, weren't they?
Stunning.
Right, time now for sport, and Manchester City fans may not have to wait too much longer to see their new signings. Here's David.
Yeah, 3 new faces have come into City this week at a total cost of around £125 million, and Pep Guardiola says all 3 will go straight into his matchday squad for their game with Chelsea. Well, the highly rated striker Omar Marmoush is the latest addition, signing from the German club Frankfurt. And the new arrivals have joined just in time for 2 crucial home games that the City boss is calling finals. They play top 4 rivals Chelsea tomorrow before a must-win match in the Champions League against Club Brugge next Wednesday.
Goal this week is really important. The next 2 games are finals for us, so we're going to, with our people, they're going to support us to do good performance and take the results that we need.
Well, Liverpool are also at home tomorrow. They play Ipswich, and despite leading the way in both the Premier League and the Champions League, Arne Slot's side have more work to do to impress his dad. They've only lost 2 matches all season and maintained their 100% record in Europe with a win over French club Lille in midweek. But Slot Senior wasn't too happy with the way his son's team played.
My father is a fan as well, and when I call him after the game, he can also say, it wasn't as exciting as other games of Liverpool when he watched the game against Lille. And then I have to try to explain him that these games, you can easily lose if you're starting to force all kind of difficult balls. But he's not always agreeing with me then.
Remember, dads always know best. Now, Everton's trip to Brighton tomorrow will see David Moyes reach a special landmark in his managerial career. It'll be his 700th Premier League game as a manager. He's third on the all-time list, behind Sir Alex Ferguson and Arsene Wenger.
I think to myself, it's incredible, really. When you start out, I don't think you ever believe that you're maybe never going to become a Premier League manager, but to get 700 games behind me now, it's a fair achievement. So very pleased. There's two great managers ahead of me in Arsene and Alex, but I don't think I'll be making their numbers, that's for sure.
Getting that winning feeling. FOW, sponsors of the Granada Sport Report.
In rugby union, Sale Sharks are back in Premiership action this weekend as they take on the leaders Bath. Well, Sale are without 8 of their England players. They're on international duty ahead of the upcoming Six Nations, and their director of rugby admits he has mixed emotions about having so many call-ups.
I struggle with this because I wear two hats. One, first and foremost, is the club, like what's best for the club, and rightly saying having all our best players back. The other hat I wear is what's best for the person and the player, and I want them to play international rugby. I want them to be striving to be the best.
And the Six Nations kicks off a week today. England's opening game is with Ireland. Of course, you can see it live right here on ITV. Cannot wait for that one.
Very excited. And I bet, like poor old Arne Slot, you two have been told a fair few times over the years that you can do better.
Every time, after every bulletin.
Right. It's like the story of my life.
Thanks very much, David. OK, now you don't have to be a Beatles fan to know they dominated the pop music scene in the 60s and are still very relevant today.
Yeah, it wasn't just great songs, it was also because they were constantly innovating with new sounds, new techniques and new instruments.
Like the French horn, which provided that lovely soundtrack to their massive hit, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
You always laugh when you talk about the French horn, you always get a little chuckle. What's that about? And now you can see 2 of the instruments which actually featured on the album. Here's our 5th Beatle, Andy Bonner.
It's 1967. Britain is swinging, and the Beatles are about to release an album with a particular musical phrase that we'd still know nearly 60 years later.
There's no mistaking it. The moment you hear that, you know it's Sgt. Pepper.
It's amazing how those few bars totally make the song.
Wow. Now, 2 of the 4 French horns used to make that iconic sound have gone on display in the Beatles Museum.
They're actually smaller than I remember.
The brass instruments can be heard on the title track of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And today, the family of one of the session musicians were in Liverpool, as his horn was added to a collection of memorabilia.
It is something we're all very proud of. As a 3-generational family, we're all thrilled to be part of it. And obviously, like growing up, it's such a cool thing to think that your dad was part of, this iconic album, and now wonderful, displayed in this terrific museum.
John Burden was a prolific horn player, appearing on many classical, pop and film music recordings. He even played at Queen Elizabeth II's coronation. But it was his link to the Beatles that stood out to his family.
Coming from a purist musical household, we couldn't listen to pop music. When he came back from the Sgt. Pepper recording, my sister said, so how's it that you get to play with the Beatles and I can't listen to them? And he said, well, you know what? They seem like nice boys. Go ahead, you can listen to the Beatles now.
John and his colleagues recorded the piece at London's Abbey Road studios with Paul McCartney. And while Paul knew the tune he wanted, he didn't know how to transcribe the notes onto paper for them to play.
Dad wrote down Paul McCartney's hums, with a bit of, obviously, support from George Martin in the background. So Dad wrote it out for all the horn players, and then they played it, and the rest is history.
This guy's an iconic superstar, but he can't write the parts. He's got to take one of the guys to one side and have this guy writing it down for him. It's lovely.
Musicians from the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic Orchestra played this version with John's horn. He never received a credit on Sgt. Pepper, but maybe now that might be rectified. Andy Bonner, ITV News, Liverpool.
Don't say it. Katie was about to be very cheeky then. Here's Emma with the weather.
Why do I need a shower? I've been out in the rain.
The faster you go, the sooner you'll be out. You'll save water too.
United Utilities sponsors ITV Granada weather.
Hello there, very good evening to you. I hope you managed to avoid the worst that Storm Iowyn brought us. David and Robin were very brave to venture out today. Some particularly strong gusts of wind around our part of the world, and a new record for Ireland as well. 114 mile-an-hour gust recorded in Galway this morning, which is when the winds peaked. The Isle of Man had a red wind warning in force until 2 o'clock this afternoon, and we do have an amber one in force for the rest of the region until 9 o'clock this evening. But now the winds are starting to moderate as the storm pulls away north and eastwards, and so we're talking maybe 50-60 mile-an-hour winds widely instead of 70 or 80 plus. So taking a closer look at the rest of the weekend, it's not looking too bad. The wind's easing overnight tonight. I think after midnight things will ease down significantly and become a lot calmer, and then sunny spells by day, some patchy frost by night, but more unsettled as we head into next week. Over the next few hours though, the tail end of this occlusion is just going to affect the south of the region, Merseyside there, particularly parts of Cheshire, before it clears away. And then for the second part of the night, a lot calmer, and it's also going to be clear and mostly dry, so expecting some patchy frost by tomorrow morning, maybe a touch of ice where it was wetter overnight during the first part of the night. Into tomorrow then, the sun's up about 8:10 in the morning. It's a chilly, bright start, lots of sunshine, that's a nice surprise, and remaining dry for much of the day as well. However, there's quite a squally system that starts to approach from the west as we head into the late afternoon, evening and overnight period. Some winteriness at height there, but clearing away, so a bit of a chilly start on Sunday and getting wetter later on as that system approaches from the southwest. Bye-bye.
United Utilities sponsors ITV Granada weather.
Thanks, Emma. Take care of you out and about today. Gamal, have you ever played an instrument?
I played a Descant recorder terribly, and my mum couldn't stand it in the house, so we got rid when I was about 10 years old.
Well, that was better than me. I was allowed the triangle, but you know me, I'm always late, so I always miss that time.
You've got one job, Katie, one job. Bing! No, late. That is it from us this week. We shall see you on Monday. Have a good one, and we'll see you on the other side. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Good night. Bye.